So, is macrobiotics a diet, principles, or intuition?
Well, I think it can be all of those, and probably for a lot of people it starts out as being a diet and then moves on to being a set of principles for understanding foods better and choosing them, and then hopefully moves on to being something that comes from our own intuition. But I do think because we tended to stress the diet so much in the past, and sometimes the principles, that we didn't really encourage people to carry on to make it an intuitive way of eating.
Does macrobiotics have to be all or nothing?
Well, that's an interesting question, because the way humans work, we can't be a part-time vegan, and I think the same thing we try and do with macrobiotics, but I would say no, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I think you could be macrobiotic for a week and then do something else for a week and then come back to it. That's also fine. And it's one of those things that once you're familiar with macrobiotics, once you've eaten it for a while and played around with the principles and tried using your intuition, it stays with you, so you can always come back to it whenever you feel like it.
Do we live up to our macrobiotic principles of change?
Well, no, I don't think we have, and that's a shame, because I think our expression of the macrobiotic foods has been very static, probably for the last 30 or 40 years, and it should really be changing. It would almost be nice if we met every year and updated it according to the experiences we've all had over the year. But it needs to be alive, changing, flexible, evolving and developing. And it should be something, I think, that is based on our own discoveries, insights, revelations, and therefore becomes the sum total of the macrobiotic community's experience of food.
So why change anything?
Well, in the days when I started, it was very much the case, well, if you eat this way you'll never get ill and live a long healthy life. And then as time went by, different people did start to become ill, and I think it's thrown the whole idea of having macrobiotics as a diet into question. And it certainly for me makes me wonder whether any kind of diet is really healthy for too long, and if we kind of let people down by not encouraging them to go beyond the diet into just eating according to acid and alkaline, or yin and yang, or five elements, and then carry on into a more intuitive form of eating, knowing that they can always come back to the dietary way if and when it's appropriate.
We always say that macrobiotic does no harm. Is this true?
Well, you could say that as long as people are eating a wide range of macrobiotic foods, it's true on a nutritional level. But if we manage to induce a fear of certain foods into people, we end up giving them what's called a nocebo, the opposite of a placebo, where if people believe that eating sugar or meat is going to harm them, it increases the chances that they will be harmed by eating those foods.
Does Michio's standard diet represent what people really eat?
Well, I was shocked when I started macrobiotics, because I'd read a few books, been to a few classes in London, and then when I got to know many of the teachers and the people advocating it, it was pretty obvious that they regularly ate other foods themselves, and not that what they were doing wasn't healthy, but it wasn't the message that was being given out at the time. And I think in that sense the teaching of macrobiotics was in essence a dishonest or even a lie, and it would have been much better if all these years people had taught macrobiotics as the reality of what people actually eat, and out of that we could have probably played with it more and developed it further and more easily.
Is macrobiotics about education or perception?
Well, Georgia Tower wrote a lot about macrobiotics being purely educational, not prescriptive. It is difficult because a lot of people sometimes want to just try a diet, and they just want to know how you make brown rice or miso soups or cook the vegetables, or what proportion to eat things, and they don't want to be educated. But hopefully we can, if we do have to be prescriptive, do it in a way that leads straight into education, so that it's very clear and obvious that the prescriptive part is temporary, and really Macrobiotics is all about self-discovery and developing our own insights into our relationships with food and everything else.
What's the expiry date for eating a macrobiotic diet?
Well, I would say a year, but ideally a few months. Depends on the person and the situation. But I think if people have been eating a diet for over a year, they're effectively eating what someone else thinks works for them, and haven't managed to discover the diet that really works well for that person. So it's important to discourage people from just blindly eating someone else's version of the macrobiotic diet, and discover their own and start to play with that and use it.
Do we need a clear communication of change?
Well, yes, I think it is very confusing at the moment, because if you buy different books and you don't carefully read when they were first published, there's a wide difference of opinions and food recommendations and so on. And I think it is important that the macrobiotic community as a whole continually communicates the changes that are going on within macrobiotics, so that people can be aware and have easy access to what the latest version is.
What would be your way forward?
Well, in terms of food, it would be to have probably 3 parts to a macrobiotic diet. One would be a whole living food kind of diet, which would include lots of vegetables, whole grains, beans, nuts, seeds, fruit and fermented foods, which is pretty much similar to what we have. But then around that I would include all different kinds of animal foods, whether it's all kinds of fish, eggs, meat or fermented dairy foods, processed grains and various other general healthy foods, and still leave a little bit for anything else the person feels like, knowing that some of the things like sugar and alcohol and chocolate and coffee can be quite addictive, but for the person to feel that they're free to have other things, but to be aware of whether they're becoming enslaved to those foods.
So if someone is vegan, can they still follow this way and still not feel guilty that macrobiotic includes meat?
Well, yes, because macrobiotics is so varied and broad that you could easily be vegan, vegetarian, doing food combining, eating an alkaline diet or a low GI diet, and still be generally within the macrobiotic way of eating and the principles.
So how do you see the future of macrobiotics with society, with education, with schools? How do you see it integrating?
Well, I would like us to be much more proactive on the educational front, so definitely working with schools and hospitals and nurses and doctors, and of course everyday people who want to enjoy better health. And I think it's very important that when we do that, we do it in a way that inspires and encourages and is positive, showing people what they can have and how they can eat it and prepare it, rather than being negative.
Okay, thank you very much.